Living Desert Tour 'n wonderwêreld vol lewe vir jou oopknoop. Gaan op 'n Living Desert Tour en beleef 'n woestynparadys van lewe. Of gaan op 'n gewilde nightwalk en beleef 'n wonderwêreld van naglewe in die woestyn. Dit is 'n belewenis in Swakopmund wat jy nie moet misloop nie. Hierdie deel van die kuslyn is ook een van die mees gesogte plekke ter wêreld om voëllewe te bestudeer, met een van die grootste kormorantkolonies en vele ander gesogte hoogtepunte. Met groot wild, woestyndiertjies, insekte, voëls en geskiedenis knoop Bathurst Birding 'n wêreld oop wat jy vinnig sal liefkry. Al drie hierdie unieke toere vertrek direk vanaf Atlantic Villa. Besoek hulle webtuiste en bespreek vandag nog jou plek by Atlantic Villa. atlanticvilla.com.
Well, welcome in, folks. This is Chris once again with Indaba Africa. Sorry about the hiccups there, just rookie mistakes once again. My apologies for that. I think Sean says it sounded like an acid trip. I'm not so sure it was an acid trip. It might have been sounding like that scorpion scurrying across the desert there outside the Atlantic Villa from Swakopmund. A lot of folks tuning in now. Hey, thanks. Some of my regular subscribers appreciate it. And some other folks have come over from, obviously, from Willem's channel. So thank you all for joining us today. My guest today on Indaba Africa is Willem Petzer, and we're going to talk a little bit about his experiences. And hello to everybody that's joining in there. I'm not going to be able to say hi to everybody because there's quite a few people. But what I'm going to do, Christopher Ambassador. Well, thank you so much, Rudolph. That's kind of you. I guess that's to replace Lana Marks. Anyway, so listen, today, a special feature today, I was able to reach Willem Petzer, and he agreed to come on my stream. And for those of you who tune in his channel, I was just on his channel a couple of hours ago. It was a very interesting time. So with that, I'm going to bring Willem in, and I understand that you should be there now. Can you hear me, Willem?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Thank you very much for having me on your stream.
No, it's brilliant. Hey, there's a nice smile. I like that smile. In the midst of Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19, it's always nice to see people with a decent smile on their face, despite the trying circumstances. So, Willem, I first became aware of you. Actually, you're the first South Africa politics-focused YouTuber that I ever became aware of. And I think you actually just came on about 2 or 3 years ago. Is that correct?
Well, it was 2 years ago when I made a video because I was just like, I was really angry at that stage about the farm murders and the fact that these things are taking place and our government are pretending like nothing's wrong with this country. And I just decided maybe I've got the talent to speak and I've got the confidence to speak. I never struggled with any confidence, so maybe I should start a channel and speak about these things, because if I'm not going to speak about it, who is? And that was what my idea was back then. And then I made that first video about farm murders, and I made a few videos about the mainstream media in South Africa and how they manipulate and twist the truth. And that was about my first 5 videos, and then I didn't expect many people to watch it, to be honest, and the next thing I knew I was viral, and thousands of people were subscribing to my channel, and suddenly I was someone, and all these other YouTubers like Ronaldo, who has been going for like 12 years now, invited me to come debate on their channels and so on, and suddenly I was bursted into the public sphere in South Africa.
Well, indeed you were. In fact, saw you written about in the popular press, the newspapers and media, a lot of attention around you when you stormed on the scene there. Well, like I said, I didn't really pay much attention to YouTube videos before I actually came across your video, quite by accident when I was out exercising. You know, my phone popped up, and YouTube, I must have pushed it, and it had it on there because I have interest for Southern Africa. So it was kind of cool, actually. And I really hadn't followed you that much, although I did follow some of the news stories. But it was fascinating to see you on there. One of the things I found interesting is that you seem to be a very strong advocate for Afrikaans culture and Afrikaans language, and also for rural farmers and the rural security situation. Am I accurate in that description, or am I off there?
No, I think that could be an accurate description. I would say that I've fought many causes on my channel and on my own. One of those causes would be farm murders. I've been very vocal about them, and I've endured a lot of attacks. Another cause that I have is like the squatter camps that I'm trying to reach out to right now, especially during this coronavirus lockdown, which hits them especially hard. And then of course, Afrikaans language and cultural issues where the language of Afrikaans are being vilified and explicitly forbidden at universities and schools and so forth. I've been against that as well, and I've been trying to advocate for the language as well. So I would say all of those things are quite true as well.
No, it is quite interesting. You know, from outside of South Africa, when you think of South Africa and you think of Afrikaans in education, your attention goes to Stellenbosch. You think that's the premier Afrikaans medium university. But as I understand, that's not even the medium language of instruction there anymore for many of the coursework. Much of it's done in English now. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, all of it's in English now. They've completely removed Afrikaans from the university there. And they've done it from all of the universities. There were, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 14 universities in the country which was Afrikaans as its first language and as its medium of education. And over the course of the last 3 decades, they have removed every single one of them and made every single one of them into a English university, and in some other places they have combined the Afrikaans university with the English university in the area. An example of this would be the University of Johannesburg, which is actually quite a few universities, quite a few Afrikaans universities that were joined into one university that became one big English university. So all the old Afrikaans universities were basically now taken over. The only one that still has Afrikaans as a medium of instruction is the University of Potchefstroom, but they are fighting very hard to remove it there as well.
It's interesting because, of course, Afrikaans is one of the 11 official languages of South Africa, but you wouldn't get that perception from the outside if you look at events there, particularly with the removal from the language of the medium language for teaching in schools and universities. But one thing I would say from the outside is that I've seen kind of a sparking or sparkling of popular Afrikaans culture, particularly when it comes to music. The number of Afrikaans performers has exploded, and a lot of them are doing quite well in South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and abroad as well. Do you listen to any Afrikaans music before we get any of the hard questions?
Of course, yes, I do. And I think we can actually talk about that as well from a cultural perspective. I think people get more ethnocentric the more they are under threat. And I think because Afrikaans and Afrikaner people are under a huge threat at this stage in South Africa, and everyone just wants to try and destroy our culture and our language and everything because of that huge threat that we are under. Things like Afrikaans music, and especially you can say nationalistic Afrikaans music like Bok van Blerk and some of the things that Steve Hofmeyer does, are exploding into the scene. And I think it's just a natural reaction or an instinctive reaction of the collective when it's under such a big threat to turn towards a more cultural centric view or more national centric view within your own people, and instead of just looking at the broader spectrum of everyone that is in South Africa.
Well, I certainly understand where you're coming from there. It's interesting for me, though, and I get why people would say Bok van Blerk is nationalist or defending culture, but of course, his big attention that got to him initially was De La Rey. That's a huge song, and it was heard around the world, not just in South Africa. But when I listen to De La Rey, and maybe that's because I know history, I didn't go, the Afrikaans people under assault. That's part of the motivation. I understand why I did it. But to me, it was harkening back to the Boer War and the conflict between the Brits and between the Afrikaners, the Boers, between the Orange Free State and the Transvaal, and the Brits trying to take over those republics. And what happened there? I mean, he talks about the Khakis. I mean, that's what they call the British troops. To me, it was nationalistic, I suppose, but an awful lot of black nationalists in South Africa took that as some kind of call to arms against black nationalism. And I just scratched my head. I said, are you listening to it? Are you watching the video that he eventually produced on this? To me, it wasn't about Afrikaners make a lager, circle the wagons, and defend yourself. Mm-hmm. It was more about Afrikaner pride. Did I miss the boat on that one, or does that sound right?
I think you missed half of the song. Firstly, well, De La Rey is probably one of the most mild songs that he has put out. Things like Afrikaner Hart and Ons vir jou Suid-Afrika, and some of the other songs that he made were much more explicitly nationalistic. Yeah. But the thing about De La Rey, and that was his first hit, is it's not just about the history. He is drawing a parallel between the events of the history and what's happening today. If you listen to the chorus, it says, De La Rey, come lead us again. And it's in present tense. It's not in past tense. So the actual deeper meaning behind the song is more of a meaning of, we need someone to De La Rey to come lead us again, because we need a leader now, because we are under huge threat. And I think everyone who is Afrikaans and who is living in South Africa understood that song in that way. It wasn't a call to arms or a call to violence or action or anything of that sort. I think it's more a call to a cultural leader. But of course, the ANC exploit the situation around the song to create their narrative of fear within their voters, because fear-mongering against the Boere is something that the ANC uses every election all the time. Like the last election, Cyril Ramaphosa said, everyone has to vote ANC, because if they don't vote ANC, the Boere will come and they will conquer you again. And this is literally what he said. Yeah. He told them the Boere will come back and they will conquer you, and if you don't vote ANC, the ANC is the only ones that can protect you from the Boere. And if we're not there, it's you and the Boere, and the Boere is going to obliterate you. So that's the propaganda of fear that the ANC uses all the time. And I think they just use that song, and the fact that song became so exceptionally popular as more of that fear-mongering propaganda.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Bok van Blerk, as well as a number of other artists, including folks like Snotkop. But Bok van Blerk, a couple of songs really hit home with me. Tijd om te trek, that's one that's amazing. I love that song, the video that goes along with it. And then when he sings Afrikaner Sing, I don't know if that's Afrikaner Heart or if that's another song where there's white and colored South Africans who are singing in Afrikaans. It's a brilliant video.
Yeah, the one Tijd om te trek is probably one of his most explicitly political videos, because as you can see, it's a white family on a farm, and then there's this bunch of black terrorists attacking them with a bit unrealistically aggressive weapons and AK-47s, and you have whatnot. And then they flee from their farm. So that one is exceptionally political. It's much more political than De La Rey, I would say. But yeah.
Well, for me, it actually I understand where it's coming from, what he wrote about, but the footage and the melody, it reminds me of other places in Africa where this similar sort of thing has happened, where NGO workers and or people living in these countries have to flee and evacuate, and what happens. So it just kind of reminded me of that. It's very inspirational. I'm sure that the EFF was triggered by that video.
Well, as you said, it's very true. It's happening all over the African continent. You think you go there and you're going to do some good, and you're going to help the people. You're going to be a doctor, for example. I know a person who dedicated his life to be a missionary doctor in one of the rural homelands in Northwest with the Tswana people, and he was brutally murdered there. And he's not alone. I think, and these murders don't just involve him being murdered and maybe stuff being stolen. Most of them involve the person being tied to some pole and then tortured for hours on end, and then they finally die of pain usually. And this is what happens over and over and over again. But if you talk about these things, and if you tell people that these things are happening, not just in South Africa, but all over Africa, but specifically and especially in South Africa, then they do their utmost best to make you seem like some liar or some propagandist, because it's absolutely taboo to just speak the truth about what's happening.
No, absolutely. I have a story about the farm murders from personal experience, not having experienced it, but an event when I went to South Africa in 2000. I'll get to that in a little bit, but back to the music very quickly, and then I want to ask a little bit about you personally, if you don't mind. But on the music, is that an Energade?
Yes, that is. It's an irrigate, yeah.
I'm dying for those. I miss that. That and biltong is what I miss the most.
Yeah, I've got some biltong or dry horse here as well. If you want to check it out.
Nah, I'll pass on the horse, but the biltong I'll take. But so for folks who are new to my channel tuning in, listen, just mention this very quickly. If you look on the screen there, you'll see a banner for the Lockdown concert live stream that took place on May 8th from Giselle. She's an Afrikaans singer from Grootfontein in Namibia who grew up there and also grew up in the Northern Cape. And so a lot of people who tuned in for the concert said, she's got a funny accent. Is she from Namibia? Indeed, she is. She lives in Pretoria now. And her manager and I spoke, and they asked if they could live stream her album debut, which she was supposed to go on tour for this, but the COVID-19 put an end to that. So they went ahead and debuted the album, Willem Petzer, and it was on my channel. So you can look on our past live streams. She sings folk music, or what I would say in German, or Heimatlieder, folk music, country music, which I'm not a big fan of, but she's quite good. She sings in English and Afrikaans and country, and then she does Afrikaans pop. So you should check her out on my stream, or just go find her on Facebook or on the internet. Anyway, so that's up there. Now she's got an amazing and stirring song, Willem Petzer. She sings about Afrikaans, Die Taal is in ons bloed. It's an amazing song. You guys should check it out. But I just wanted to mention that very quickly since I got that banner up there to explain why it's there. So on the farm murders, before I get to that, let me ask you this, Willem. So what's your background? I mean, are you a farmer? Are you an IT guy? Are you a cardiac surgeon? What is it you do for a living, or what have you grown up to do? What's your avocation?
Well, when I always had family on the farm and so on, and so I grew up on more than one farm as we've been there on all of my holidays and so on and so forth. But I grew up in the city, and then after matric I studied veterinary medicine, and then I started studying theology in 2019. So because I thought that it would be better, or that it would be better suited for my calling to have a what do you call it, an opleiding, let me just get the English word, have an education in theology, because I think that corresponds well to my calling for my people here in South Africa. So I'm studying part-time theology, and then part-time I'm doing this YouTube channel and social media and stuff, and then also I am busy writing a book. If you translate the title to English, the book's name would be Where to Now Afrikaner, or it would be like the Latin word Quo Vadis. And inside that book I lay out a plan for Afrikaners to survive South Africa, and the only way that we can actually survive in South Africa with the harsh antagonism that are being perpetuated against us. So that's what I'm busy with now, and yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. That's the second option that you said is more to give me a psychological and a philosophical and a theological understanding of the people around me and of the sociological situation in South Africa and of group dynamics and so forth. And I think theology is probably the best suited, especially if you want to study the sociology and anthropology of the Afrikaner nation. You need to have a very, very good understanding of Reformed theology. And that's why I decided to study Reformed theology, because with that Reformed theology you can understand who the Afrikaner is as a nation, as a culture. Because if you don't understand the Afrikaner's theology, you will never understand who the Afrikaner is. And it is probably the most important part of the Afrikaner culture.
Well, I think that Dutch Calvinism plays such a strong role in the creation of the Afrikaner identity for the Boers and then eventually Afrikaners. So that makes all the sense in the world to me. Are you finding it to be helpful so far, your studies in it? You say it's part-time you're studying.
Yes, definitely. Like, for example, I'm studying a professor called Henk Stoker right now. He lived just over 100 years ago. He lived through the Boer Wars, and he wrote his philosophy on who the Afrikaner is after the Boer Wars, and that was his big contribution to the intellectual realm of Afrikaans. And I think he's probably the best philosopher that the Afrikaner has ever had, and he captures the soul of the Afrikaner nation so well. And these things definitely helped me with my own studies and with my own research and writing this book for the Afrikaner as a way to cope with what's going on around us. That I wouldn't find any other field of study to do anything in that sense. But my other studies, my veterinary medicine studies, involved a lot of animal health, and it also involved like pasture studies and nutritional studies and all of that things. So it puts me in a situation where I've got the knowledge to be able to debate anyone who debates me on the land question, and on people who want to take away your farms and your land, by asking him the simple questions whether he has the knowledge to do anything with it. And because I actually do have the knowledge to know how you grow crops and how to look after livestock and so on, it's very easy for me to in a debate prove to someone like that it's not that easy to be a farmer, and you need a lot more knowledge and than you would think you'd need to do that. So yeah.
No, it's interesting because here in the U.S., famously during our presidential campaign in the Democratic primary, Michael Bloomberg was running as a Democrat, although he'd been a member of the Republican Party, and he was caught on video. Not caught. He gave a presentation in Europe a few years ago, and he was interviewed, and he dissed farmers in a major way, talking about, well, I can teach anyone to be a farmer. You just plant a seed and it grows. You put water on it. Myself, I was also a farmer. I was a dairy farmer when I was in high school. We had Jerseys and Guernseys and Holstein, and also, of course, the horses, chickens, ducks, turkeys, rabbits, and some garden farming along with that. And I'll tell you what, I've always had a great deal of respect for the farming community. That's one reason I have an interest in it, and I agree with you. It takes an awful lot to be a successful farmer. You have to be an agronomist, you have to be a climatologist, you have to know about science, you have to know about irrigation, power systems. It's a whole list of things. It's not simply, here's a piece of land, go grow something. And I find that discussion to be quite disingenuous and irritating when people make it overly simple how hard it is to do agriculture. Does it affect you in the same way? You feel the same way?
Definitely, because the biggest argument that we hear here in South Africa, the fact that we have about 30,000 white farmers, commercial farmers in South Africa, and they basically feed the whole nation. We have less than 1,000 big commercial black farmers here. So it's very insignificant, but then people always make this argument that, it's because they are racist and there are racist systems in place that there are so many white farmers, because these white farmers they just, sit inside their truck and give out orders, and then the black people do the actual farming. And then they make this argument like, there are so many black people that have worked for 20 years on a farm. How can you say that he's not able to farm? And then it's just so juvenile to make that argument, and so exceptionally stupid, because if I picked oranges for 20 years, or if I, fixed wire for 20 years or whatever, does that qualify me in soil science, in botany, in like veterinary medicine, in zoology, in all of the knowledge that you need to actually farm? I mean, you can't just have a bunch of animals and let them walk around and eat grass and not be able to know what the grass is and what species of grass it is and what the nutritional value of every species is, and if it eats this amount of this species, how long can you keep it on this piece of land until you need to move it to another one and rotate your grazing and all of that. And it's the same for someone who's like a crop farmer. You need to have exceptional knowledge of soil science, of fertilizers, of poisons, of different strains of crops to plant and which strain will work in which area. You have to know about the climate. You have to know when the rain will come. All of that stuff. Just picking the oranges won't give you that knowledge, and it won't be able to make you a farmer. I think people who studied for 6 years to become a farmer at university and they have all of this knowledge, they still are not equipped to be a farmer. They still need to work for at least 5 to 10 years under someone who knows how to farm before they can start farming on their own. And this is a guy who studied all of the sciences for many, many years at university. And now you get this argument that anyone who can pick oranges can farm.
No, absolutely. I think it's very disingenuous. I mean, when you're in a farming community, farming culture, you grow up with it. Here in the U.S., we have things like 4-H, which is a series of clubs in rural communities about farming and also animal husbandry and things like that. But in our high schools, we have the Future Farmers of America, FFA, which is a club that people get in who are becoming farmers. And then most of our farmers go to university here in the U.S. these days. I mean, you go to university to get some sort of degree that is applicable for becoming a farmer. I would argue that for most farmers in the 21st century doing modern farming, it's a vocation, not a vocation, a profession. It's almost white collar in some respects. You're tilling the soil, but you have to have the skills that white collar people have in order to be successful.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So,
especially if you want more than holistic farming, you need to have very good knowledge of chemistry and so forth. So, yeah.
Well, there's a couple of comments here. Christoph Havanga, who gave a super chat on your program, so I'm going to mention his comment because I don't have super chat on here enabled. He says, it's the same as a clerk claiming to be the CEO of any company. And Jack Sparrow, I guess that's the guy from the pirate movie there, is tilling crops do not make you a farmer, just a laborer. And by the same token, for a comparison that makes sense for me, being an infantryman doesn't mean you're qualified to be the chief, the Joint Chiefs of Staff head as a 4-star general. Just because you served 30 years in the Army doesn't mean you're qualified to do every job the Army has. So I think those are apt comparisons.
Yeah, that's a very good point you make with the Army, because there are many people who spend 30 years in the Army and never rank up to anything significant. And then you just have to admit that not everyone has the ability to ever rank up. Not everyone can be taught to be a general. It's just 1 or 2 people, or 3 or 4 people that you will know in your entire life who's got it in him to become a general in the Army. And that's the big problem with the ideology that we are sitting here with, this ideology of equality, because this ideology says that no matter who you are and no matter what special gifts the Lord gave you when you were born, you should be able to become that general. And it's patently different from the Christian worldview where you thank God that, I've got the IQ to become a general. I'm not going to be a troop for the rest of my life. And as I said, maybe 5 in a million people can actually say that.
No, I agree with you. It's the problem is that, and we have this here in America going on too, and we've seen it in Europe over the past 20 years or so as the European Union developed. We see a situation where it's a question of the ANC is trying to achieve equality of outcomes as opposed to folks who are focused on equality of opportunity. If everyone has an equal and fair opportunity to apply their God-given talents, their hard work, their perseverance, their ingenuity, that's a different situation than simply trying to make all of us dumb, poor, and starving, which seems to be the objective of leftists and progressives the world over. I think we probably agree on that one.
I think the problem is it goes much deeper than that, because you say it's equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity. But if you look at this ideologues, especially the leftist ideologues on the hard left, they would argue that if there is total equality of opportunity, then the outcome for everyone will be exactly the same. And if there isn't an equality of outcome, then it is a sign that there is no equality of opportunity, because they cannot ever admit to the fact that some people are just born with more in them than other people are born with, and some people are just born with the ability to become something much greater. The great German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe said that we love young girls for who they are, but we love young boys for who they promise to become. And it just illustrates this point to you that an individual, even when he's only a young boy, a little boy who's running around playing with his toys, he already shows promise to become something great, or he doesn't. And the fact is that thousands of people don't, while 1 out of that thousands of people actually do show the promise to become something great. And that's something that you can't ever fit into the ideology of socialism or communism.
Right. Well, the point I'm making is not, and I don't buy the leftist or progressive argument that it's truly about equality of outcomes. But that's the theology they create for themselves, because there's no such thing as equality of outcomes. It doesn't work that way in the real world. That's not the nature of human beings. So I don't agree with it. I'm just saying that it's a direct opposition for those who look at equality of opportunity, so everyone gets a fair chance. I mean, ostensibly, the horror of apartheid was that people were treated unfairly and unequally, and that needed to be corrected. Well, apartheid is gone. The system is in place. People should be able to make equal fairness opportunity, but we see it going quite the opposite direction. Well, let me ask you this question. So you said that you study veterinary medicine. My mother wanted me to be a vet. We had a horse, and her eyelid got caught on a nail. We had a home fire, and we moved to another place, and I was told to go in and clean this old barn out, a paddock, where she would stay at night. And I couldn't see because it wasn't lit, and I missed the nail. It was hanging off. So there was a lightning storm. She was frightening, and she cut her eyelid. And if you know about horses, that's just bone under there. There's nothing to stitch it back to. So the vet came out. My mother was all excited for me to become a vet. And that's a very lucrative profession here in America. You make a lot of money as a vet. Anyway, the vet came out, and he looked at it, and I said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "Well, we're going to take care of it." And he took out a scalpel, and he cut her eyelid off. And I'm like, "What are you doing? Aren't you going to stitch it back?" He goes, "To what?" And that was the end of my interest in being a vet. So you actually practice veterinary medicine, and if you do, how is that?
No, I never practiced veterinary medicine. I only studied, but I never finished all the things that you have to do in order to become a full qualified vet here. I never did practicals or any of that. I just did some theoretical studies. But during my studies as a vet, I already felt this calling to become one can almost say a leader within my community. And I didn't think that as a vet would be the right way to do it, because a vet is a bit of a very individualistic profession where you work on your own for your whole life, and you just see a person when he's got a problem with his animal, you fix the problem and you leave, and that's the end of it. Well, I want to be something that's more involved in the bigger picture, holistically speaking, in society.
No, that makes sense. Some nice compliments to you here on this side. My Afrikaans isn't brilliant there, but PsychDoc, I think, said something very nice complimenting you there, Willem. But so when we talk about land, of course, what's often overlooked about land is that much of the land that people want who don't have land is usually for residential property. They want to build a house in an urban area or something like that. But this has turned into a farm argument. There is legitimate issues about farmland and restitution, some of which has been dealt with in the last 20 years, but a lot of it has not necessarily been dealt with in an effective fashion by the ANC, and they haven't really supported it. I think I might have mentioned in your stream, I know I mentioned before that, they give $4 billion this year to ESCOM to save it, and they spend $35 million for land purchases. That's just insane. That's not serious. But 87% of the land in South Africa is not even arable. Yes, you can use it for grazing in many places, but 87% is not even arable. So we're not even talking about a lot of land. It's not well watered. So it's a real challenge here when you talk about farmland. But I think it's always a disingenuous argument when people start talking about the land as if it's all just sitting there vacant, unused, and available for people. What do you think? I mean, is that off the mark, or am I missing something?
That's 100% correct. And the fact is that they always bring up this argument that I think only 12% of the land was ever given to black people. But if you go look at the areas where black people were actually, given these lands, let me just quickly pull up a map here so I can show the audience. If you look at, let me just get this, so people can see what I'm doing. All right, so I think if I do this, it'll pop up there by your side.
Yep.
But in any case, so let's move this to satellite view, because I always find it's much easier to explain it to people if they look at the map like this. So this is a map of South Africa, and if you look at this, only this green part here which goes through here, and this little part right here is the arable part of South Africa where it rains enough. Basically, everything to the east of, to the west of it is desert. You can see from this brown area right here, this is desert, and this yellowish green.
They can't see the map, Willem. They can't see the map. I'm not sure how to get in. My apologies. Coming through.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought that if I share the screen with you, they would see it.
No, they can't.
But in any case, I can probably make my my point by just explaining it.
Yeah.
And by explaining it, if you look at the whole western part of South Africa, that whole western part of South Africa is basically desert or semi-desert, and there's only this little piece on the east and on the east coast. That's very good agricultural arable land. And if you look at the map of, if someone wants to put it up, the map of the homelands, the black homelands, you will see that all of these black homelands fall into the area that is actually good arable, farmable soil, especially places like the Transkei is built on the most fertile soil in the South African country. So that argument is really stupid, because they say that they couldn't become farmers because they didn't have the land, but they actually had the majority of arable farmland of the places that actually are wet enough and what's the word? Let me just get it.
Fertile enough. The soil is fertile.
Yeah, fertile enough to actually farm. So that argument is a bit of a fallacy in that way.
No, absolutely. Well, also, the whole thing, I don't know if we're going to get into it here, but because that would take a lot of time, but we've broached on the topic. But the whole discussion about land is disingenuous, because at CODESA, the Convention for Democratic South Africa, all parties agreed on what I consider a reasonable point in time, 1910, because there was no South Africa before that. It was a collection of British colonies, African kingdoms, and independent Boer states like the Free State, Natalia briefly, and of course the Transvaal. So there was no South Africa before that. It was just a geographic location. So the Union of South Africa Act by the British Parliament creates in 1910. So everybody agreed in 93, 94, 92 that there would be no land claims prior to that. And that's reasonable. Otherwise, you're the Palestinians claiming that, the Jews don't belong in Israel, but they were there 5,000 years ago. So who came first? And as I've told a lot of people, if we want to play this game, then everybody except the Khoi and San can footsec and get out of South Africa, because you all came after the Khoi and San. They were there before the Europeans or the Bantus. But yeah.
Well, exactly. And if you take that argument a little bit further, the South African government is so very, very proud of the fact that the so-called cradle of humankind is in South Africa. So this means that everyone originated in South Africa, so everyone has a claim to this country. So that argument is exceptionally stupid.
Of course it is stupid. Yeah, it's one that I make all the time. I wrote an article 2 years ago about land and poverty in South Africa. It's on LinkedIn, free if anybody wants to look it up, in which I put forward an argument about how people being disingenuous when they talk about white monopoly capital and about land distribution and the dates. Hearing this nonsense about Jan van Riebeck stole my land. No, he didn't steal your land. You weren't alive then, unless you have an amazingly long lifespan. He didn't take your land. Anyway.
Exactly.
But not to get down that rabbit hole, because it's quite a direction we can go. But back to the farm murders, because I know that's something that is a topic very near and dear to your heart. So for me, in 2000, I took a trip to South Africa, and I traveled all over the country on this particular trip. And on the way there, I was reading the Wall Street Journal on my flight from Europe to South Africa to Joburg. And there was an article in there talking about this heartbreaking story about a Norwegian retiree who had moved to South Africa and had bought a disused farmstead in KwaZulu-Natal. And he bought it and brought it back. He was like 68 years old when he got there, a retiree from Norway with his wife. He got the farm working. He hired about 30 Zulus to work on the farm, paid their wages every week. And he would go into town to the bank and collect the money and pay them on the weekend. Well, a couple of his farm workers, I know this is a story you've heard 1,000 times in other farms, but a couple of farm workers decided they wanted the money. So they hired a couple of Tutsi or thugs from Joburg to come down. And they broke in the house and they locked his wife up in the pantry, not realizing there was a window she could escape out of. They pistol whipped this 68, 69-year-old man, beat him to death in his kitchen trying to get the wages, and they got the wages, and then they just tortured him. She got out the window, crawled through the thorn bushes to the next farmstead a few kilometers away, and then called for help. The point of this story is that he's not South African. He came there, he bought disused land, no one was tilling it, no one was working it. He put people to work, paid their wages, and some gangsters and thugs wanted some money. So they tortured him as if they had some vendetta against him and murdered him. And these are the stories that disturb me. Now, here's the piece of the story. It's not fascinating, but really unusual. I do research on ethnic Germans, and of course, there's a lot of ethnic Germans in South Africa to this day, and they make a big part of the Afrikaans community. So I went to Rorke's Drift and then Isan Luanda to view the sites. When I was at Rorke's Drift, I happened to mention that I speak German fluently, and the person there said, well, have you gone to Elandskral? And I said, no. Why? He said, well, there's a German Lutheran church there. I said, really? And I just assumed it was one that was built 150 years ago and it was in disrepair or something like that. So I went to Isan Luanda and I looped around and came back and went to Elandskraal. I know there's more than one Elandskraal in South Africa, but this one's in KZN. So I went there and I saw this stone German Lutheran church in the German style, built right in the middle of a ridgeline. So I pulled up to it thinking, wow. And I got out, I parked the car, and I walked around the cemetery because I'll walk through cemeteries frequently just to see. And I assumed I'd see, some German tombstones from 1860 or something like that. No, this was August of 2000, and there was a fresh grave. Someone had just passed away, and it was all in German. I'm like, what? So I'm walking around, and someone calls out to me in Afrikaans, and of course my Afrikaans was not particularly good. I understand it, but didn't speak it well. So I used my most famous phrase, which is "Ek praat nie Afrikaans nie." So anyway, so the guy called me over and he started speaking to me in English, and then we started talking. He was a German Lutheran pastor there, an Afrikaans speaker. His first language is German, fourth generation German in South Africa. Second language Afrikaans or English, third language Afrikaans, fourth language is Zulu. He also spoke Zulu, and he was telling me that Norwegian was one of his churchgoers who had passed away. It's a really sad story. It's just, and you can repeat this repeatedly throughout South Africa. In '94, there were 68,000 commercial farmers in South Africa. Today, you might have 32,000. A lot of reasons for it.
I think it's probably less right now because that number of 32,000 is also almost 8 years old. So 8 years has gone by. I think it can be closer to 20 now.
Well, that's a pretty shocking statistic, to quite a decline in the number of farmers. There's a lot of reasons for it, but the thing that's always bothered me, and maybe you can share a little bit about this. So with AfriForum, one of the things I was always curious about, and maybe they're doing this now because I haven't been paying close attention to AfriForum of late, but I always thought that the issue needed to be couched in these terms. It's an issue of rural security, not of farm murders. Farm murders is part of it. That's a huge part of it, but it's beyond that. Farm workers get murdered by these thugs. We see them come on property from video footage where they have walkie-talkies and they have night vision goggles and they have, advanced weaponry. These are not just people looking for revenge or just trying to rob the local farmer. Some cases that is the case, but there seems to be a lot more going on in some of these instances. Is this?
Yeah, we've even seen some people who can block cell phone and radio signals with the equipment that they have. And you said you mentioned the story where they were after the wages, but Aaron Roots from AfriForum once made a statement, and he said that it's only roughly 70% of farm murders where anything was stolen, and I mean it's where nothing was stolen, and then only 30% where something was stolen. So 70% of the times nothing's even stolen. The people are just tortured for hours and then they left and nothing is stolen. I think the fact that if you go into the house and you don't even loot it, you don't even steal anything, you just go and you torture the people there to death, it's to send a very clear message that you are not here to steal, because you specifically send that message, because it's so easy just to, if you want something, just to take it. If there's something nice in the house that you want, you can just take it. So they're sending a very clear message with these attacks.
No, I think that's definitely part of it. But the thing that disturbs me is that it seems like the ANC has done all the things they possibly can to reduce security in the rural areas. When I was working at a particular government agency, I wrote frequently about the idea to disband the commandos, and I projected that this would have a very negative result on rural security, and that also drug trafficking would skyrocket. Imagine what I was right. The removal of 168 commando units had a detrimental effect. And of course, the ANC couched that in terms of, it's historical, it's a race-based sort of thing. But of course, that looked past the reality that the most recent 4 commandos that had been activated were in KZN, and they were entirely black commando units, and they were actually the only form of formal employment for most of the members when they came and did the reserve duty to do coordinated search operations, looking for Daga, Mandrax, and also responding to farm break-ins and things like that. Very, very disheartening to see it, but I've seen everything I've seen in the past 26 years seems to be that the ANC has been reducing the presence of law enforcement and rural law and order.
I just want to say, Chris, people are complaining about the echo from my side, but that's probably because you use your own speakers, you don't use headphones. Maybe you should just put some headphones in, because it will reduce the echo, it will take the echo away, actually. Sorry for saying that.
No, that's quite all right. Okay, why don't you talk for a second about what I just said, and I'll grab my earphones and see if it makes a difference, okay?
Okay, just put your sound off so the echo can stop. But yeah, in any case, so what you were talking about, where were we? I think, I see username here says military grade jamming equipment, and I actually wanted to mention that earlier is that some photos and videos came out of people who had these military grade equipment. That's actually it's illegal to have it in South Africa. I know in America it's legal to have cell phone signal jammers. It's just not legal to use it, but you may have it. But in South Africa, it's illegal to have them. But the ones that they had, they were so big that one person can't carry the whole jammer. So this was one of those massive signal jammers that can jam signals in a radius of something like 40 kilometers. And they had that with them on the farm, and so the people can't call for help. They can't let anyone know that there's an attack on their farm. And if you have that sort of military equipment, then it just brings up some questions like where did you get it, and who supplied it to you, and why. And that's it.
No, absolutely. So is this better? Can you still hear me, Willem?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, yeah, I can hear a lot better now too. Hopefully the echo's gone, although I still see comments coming up. I think that was from the delay. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure it should be done now.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that, folks. Absolutely. That's people acquiring things they shouldn't have is really a disturbing question. But to me, the issue of rural security, having been a farmer, knowing how far you are isolated from law enforcement. I mean, we have counties in America where the sheriff is 2.5-hour drive from a farm. And so this is an issue that's important here, and we do see some rural crime that takes place and farm attacks. But of course, we have the Second Amendment, and most of our farmers are well armed, and so we defend our farms against. I know that many South African farmers are well armed too, but this is a very difficult situation when you're isolated like that. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, many people make this argument that the only reason why farm murders are so prevalent is because they are easy targets, and it's easier to commit crime in the rural area than in the city. But I find this 100% false. Firstly, if you commit a crime in the city, it's very easy to get away and to just disappear into the masses in the city. But you can't just disappear in a rural area. When you committed a crime and the people are after you, it's almost impossible for you, if you are 2.5 hours drive from any city or any town, to disappear. And the other thing is, I always tell people who says that, it's only a rural problem and it will happen in any rural problem, then they should compare crime statistics in South Africa to crime statistics in rural Wyoming, for example. And I actually did this in one of my statistics videos where I compared it, and there are towns in Wyoming that spans over hundreds of thousands of acres, the farming land, where there hasn't been a single crime being committed for the last 10 years. While in South Africa, farm murders is a thing that happens all the time, or almost every day you see an attack that happens. So these things are impossible to look past if you actually start comparing these two.
A couple things real quick to move from that just a second here. So who was this? From Africa, he said, referring to Afrikaans, he said that I speak Afrikaans better than many members of parliament in South Africa. That might be a true statement. I thought that was entertaining. And then he also asked a question about why the Bulls. So let me divert from where, excuse me a second, I got a scam caller calling on my mobile here. Get rid of that. So why the Bulls jersey? Well, this is out of respect for my guest, who's from Gauteng, from Pretoria area there. So I'm wearing a Blue Bulls jersey. For those who watch my stream, my thing is whenever I do a stream or I do a prepared video, certainly, what I do is I have a rugby jersey up and usually a rugby scarf. If you look behind me, you'll see that on this side, this is South Africa versus New Zealand, the dreaded All Blacks from Yokohama, a game that I was present at and deeply disappointed in the outcome. But it doesn't matter because we walked away with the trophy at the end, so that's fine. We got the Web Elves. On the other side is the Bull. Whoops, where am I at? This side. Oh, here you go. The Bull. Wait, wrong side. There you go. Here's the Bulls. I'm not a Bulls fan, although at times I've enjoyed them in the past, particularly when Victor Matfield and others were playing there. I'm a Western Province Stormers supporter, for those who don't know, and I'm a massive rugby fan. I've been to the Rugby World Cup, the last 6 of them, I think. 2011 New Zealand, 2014 for the women in Paris, 2015 England, 2017 for Ireland for the women, 2018 the Sevens World Cup in San Francisco, and 2019 Japan. So I'm a huge rugby fan, and the Springboks are my favorite team. Anyway, but I'm wearing the Bulls because my guest is from the area, and I've been to Loftus many times. In fact, I bought this at Loftus, this jersey. So that's what that. I'm not going to wear a Lions jersey. Somebody asked if they could get me a Cheetahs jersey. I'll wear it if you get it, because Billy LaRue used to play for them. He's one of my favorite players. But anyway, if somebody could get me a Greek Whiz shirt, I'd love that. Those are hard to come by. Anyway, and then somebody's, there's a lot of, I'm sorry. Yeah, anyway, yeah, so, all right, so yeah, off of that. So I just want to get those few comments in there very quickly. So what drives you these days, Willem? I mean, what gets you excited? I mean, I've seen a couple of your recent videos. Maybe we can talk about those before we close out. I saw the one on the Bianca story about the young girl as a young kid doing tweets and how that was blown up. And then the other one I saw was the squatter camp story about the disgusting performance by a pretend journalist from SABC attacking someone for living in a squatter camp and accusing him of being racially isolated. And my thought was, I'm sorry, are you angry because this elderly poor gentleman lives in a camp where mostly old age poor white pensioners live and they're not integrated? So you would prefer that black people live there and be poor too? Is that what you want?
No, I think let's start with the whole Bianca incident. So she was a contestant for Miss South Africa, and when she was like 14 years old, she obviously went through a phase where she thought it was very cool to speak in this ghetto speak, this Nicki Minaj, Kanye West type of speak, and she had this a lot of tweets where she made jokes in ghetto language, in which she used that Reddit N-word of yours, and well, not in a racial way, but in a I'm a cool hip hop fan girl type of way. And these things happened like 7 years ago, and now someone has pulled them up again, and she basically destroyed her career as a model in South Africa. And I just thought that this points to two things. Firstly, maybe you should teach your daughters it's not cool to be a gangster rapper, and she shouldn't go out and pretend like she's some gangster rapper all the time, and because this is the outcome of it. And on the other hand, it just shows you how people are willfully willing to misunderstand something that someone said just in order to hurt them as much as possible. And the other topics that I talked about was these white squatter camps, and I had to go there because they were being discriminated against because of this. During the lockdown, when they didn't receive any food parcels, and I just thought by myself, all the least I can do is buy a bucket load full of food and take it to them, and maybe that will inspire some other people to do the same. Because these people really need food now. They don't have an income. Usually they are craftsmen and they make stuff which they sell, which is their income. But now they can't sell any of it, so they have zero income. And that's the reason why I made these videos. Just to inspire other people and to show them what's going on, and to inspire them, to go to these white squatter camps as well. And maybe if you have 1,000 rands or 2,000 or 3,000 rands laying around, which you can use to help your people, go to the store, buy some food, and just drop it off there. So yeah, that's what the last week or so was about.
No, well, that whole video, I mean, it's just the lunacy of the questions of the pseudo journalist, and he's not a journalist. He's just he's a talking head who's taking his talking points from someone, asking the most inane question. These people live in abject poverty in a squatter camp, and you're angry because other people don't live there with them in the squatter camp? I mean, if they lived in a gated community and they were turning people away from coming to their community, that's a different story. But we're talking about people in abject poverty. It just really disturbed me. So I really appreciate that you took the time to make that video and to point out the hypocrisy of what was going on, because it gets to people outside the country, and I think people need to be aware of this. It's just ridiculous. So now you talk about giving charitable donations, but what we've seen in the past several weeks under this draconian lockdown that the ANC has imposed, with no rationale behind it at this point, the science doesn't support the actions they've taken. what we've seen is ordinary South African citizens and Christians in particular who are going out of the goodness of their heart trying to help others who are less fortunate, and they're being arrested and harassed by the police and by the military. Have you come across that anywhere, or are you aware of that happening?
I'm sorry, you cut out for a second. I'm not aware of what happening.
So what I said is that, as you mentioned now, giving charitable donations to help the less fortunate in this lockdown. We've seen lots of reports, and I've gotten information from South Africans that I know about people being arrested and food parcels being confiscated so that only the government is handing them out, and so that people can't be charitable and give food to help those who are less fortunate. Have you come across that?
I think the first thing that we need to speak about is the fact that the government has passed a law in which they state that in order for you to be able to give out any food parcels, you have to register with them, and you have to get a permit to do it, and you have to, you have to declare all of the parcels that you are handing out, and they are enforcing that law. And then there's a lot of videos and social media posts and so on where people claim that they have been arrested for giving out food parcels or for taking food parcels. None of it can be confirmed, and the government is denying it at every turn. So I don't think it's possible for us to be able to definitely confirm this. But that's about as much as we know about that specific situation.
The photograph I've placed on there is from Johan Orton. He's a photojournalist from South Africa who does sports, rugby and cricket and such. This is from donations that were done just in the past week in South Africa, in the Highveld, taking food out, food parcels donated by people. So I would guess that this would have been in violation of the law that the ANC has put in place, or at least the regulation. But nonetheless, I know that from my personal experience, people that I know and trust, that I consider to be reliable sources, that a lot of people are really trying to help out people who are less fortunate of all groups in South Africa. But this government position that only the government can provide this is just absolutely bizarre. It doesn't pass the common sense test. I don't really understand why they're doing it unless it's simply to control things.
I'm absolutely sure it's a racial issue, because I know of a lot of people who have been giving out food to black squatter camps and so on, and you haven't heard a peep from them of any trouble that was going on. But there are just a flood of posts all over social media of people who were trying to do the exact same thing at white squatter camps, and these are the people who complain that their food is being confiscated by the police, and some of the people who take food parcels were even arrested and kept in the cells. And these videos come out, and I have spoken about some of them on my channel all the time, but I haven't seen a single one from someone who's doing charity work in the black area who said this.
All right, thank you. No, I'm looking at the chat here. Someone keeps coming in saying I'm dodging the question. I'm not dodging any question. I don't dodge any questions. I'll answer any question anybody has. So whatever that question was, bring it back in the chat, and maybe we'll discuss it there. But so let's see. So Willem, do you think that that there's enough attention being paid outside of South Africa? I think I know the answer to this. Outside South Africa, to what's actually happening in South Africa when it comes to minorities in particular?
I think I don't know. It's difficult for me to say, because from individuals outside I hear a lot of praise and people saying that they support what I'm doing and so on. But if you look at anything official from governments and so on, then there's nothing yet, except for one guy from the Dutch parliament who was able to pass a bill against expropriation and farm murders. But except for this one Dutch parliamentarian, I haven't found anything official from outside.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, the question was from someone called Europe Rising, asking me if I'm a white nationalist. Well, that's just utter nonsense. Where would you get such a question like that from? What in anything I've said or questions I've asked or comments I've made with Willem in the last hour would give anybody the impression I'm a white nationalist? In fact, on his stream earlier, I made the specific point for folks that when I talk about South Africa, I'm not talking about Afrikaners, I'm not talking about English speakers, I'm not talking about coloreds, I'm not talking about Venda, Zulu, Xhosa, I'm talking about all South Africans. You know, one of the things in South Africa for me, Willem, is whenever I'm there, and I've been there many, many times. Of course, I lived in Gaborone, so it was a short trip for me over to Pretoria, one of the reasons why I'm so fond of it, or to Rustenburg.
But anytime I'm in South Africa, I talk to white South Africans, and I'm talking about race and the problems and the issues around race. And what do white South Africans do when they're in a restaurant or out somewhere? Shh, you can't talk about that. So I hang out with black South Africans, and I do the same thing. Shh, you can't talk about that. And I tell people, I said, listen, if you want to resolve differences and discover if there actually are differences between people, the only way to do it is through discourse. You got to talk about these issues. And of course, for me, it's a similar situation in the States. A lot of people will talk about race around their own folks and friends, but they won't talk with others, with the other. And so I'm always for that. So to see somebody put, I think somebody's trolling on here asking if I'm a white nationalist. Where does that come from? Because I look like I've got some, divinity beard or something. I have no idea what that's all about, but definitely not the case. Not a white nationalist. I would not have supported and defended my Constitution, which offers free and equal rights to everyone, if I was a white nationalist. But anyway, so Willem, I know that you've probably got to take off here shortly, so I don't want to keep you over time. But anything you'd like to add, or maybe something that I neglected to ask? We did find out that you're not a practicing vet, which was, I think, important to know.
No, that's. I think I've said. Well, I've answered all your questions. I think there's a lot more that we can talk about, but I think we can call it quits here and maybe talk about other subjects on another stream. But thank you for having me on your channel, Chris.
No, I appreciate it so much. By a donkey, Willem, it was a pleasure having you on. As I said, you were the first South African YouTuber actually caught my attention a couple years ago. So it's actually kind of interesting to have you on my channel now that I have one up and going. Ladies and gentlemen, this has, I think, been an interesting discussion. If you missed it earlier, go to Willem's channel, and you'll see our stream from earlier when we talked for about an hour. And now he interviewed me there, and I've had a chance to interview him here. So my audience is not just South African. It's also people in Europe and around the world and in the U.S. So hopefully they've learned a little bit about Willem Petzer and what he's about and what he's trying to do in South Africa for South Africans and for the country as a whole. And I hope that those who came over from his channel enjoyed this stream. Please remember that feel free to subscribe to the channel. You can go ahead. Willem, I'm going to move you off the screen, but I still got your voice actors. Hang in there. So please feel free to subscribe to the channel by pushing that subscription button right down there. Leave comments. If you agree or disagree, or if you want to debate me, go ahead and leave a comment when the video is posted, and I'll answer all of them. But if it's positive or negative, that's fine. I don't expect everybody to agree with me. That's perfectly fine. We can engage in reasonable discourse, and you can prove me wrong, or we can agree. Anyway, also I ask that you smash the like button, because likes drive viewership. The more likes the video gets, the more preponderance of viewers will turn up because it appears on channels. And so with that, I'd like to thank my guest today, Willem Petzer, who agreed to come on short notice, and it was a real pleasure to have him on. And I'll bring him back on the screen so he can say farewell, and then we'll drop off here right afterwards. You're back on the screen there, Willem.
Sorry, I was just eating. Thank you very much, Chris, for the opportunity. And you have a great day, and goodbye, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Willem. I guess I set you up with eating. My bad. I won't do that to you next time. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to Indaba Africa. This is Chris. We'll catch you next time. Remember, tomorrow I have a live stream. My special guest is Herman Roos, a tobacco farmer in South Africa. But it looks like there have been rains in the High Veld, and he might not be my guest tomorrow. If that's the case, I'll try to get another guest on, and we'll pick up the discussion on something of interest to people here and in Africa. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time. Tune in, catch Willem Petzer's channel, and please catch my channel, Indaba Africa, at Chris Wyatt Africa. Have a pleasant evening.